Welcome to Santa's Desk. Sometimes the most interesting geopolitical suggestions don't come from diplomats, they come from soldiers. Recently, a retired U.S. Army colonel made a comment during a TV interview that immediately caught attention. His suggestion? If Donald Trump truly wants to stop the growing confrontation involving the United States, Israel, and Iran, he should pick up the phone and call India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Not Beijing, not Moscow, not the United Nations, India. And that raises an interesting question. Why would India be the country that could potentially calm one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints in the world right now? Let's break it down. The tensions involving the United States, Israel, and Iran have been escalating for some time. Military activity in the region has increased. Political rhetoric has intensified. And every new development seems to push the situation a little closer to a wider conflict. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that it isn't isolated. The Middle East sits at the center of global energy markets. Any serious disruption here doesn't stay regional for long. It quickly becomes a global economic problem, and that's exactly what many analysts are beginning to worry about. During a television interview discussing the current tensions, retired U.S. Army officer Colonel Douglas Macgregor made a striking argument. According to him, if Donald Trump genuinely wants to stop the escalation and push for negotiations, there's a very specific move he should consider. Call India. More specifically, call India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Macgregor's reasoning was straightforward. India is one of the very few countries that maintains working relationships with all the major players involved in this crisis. India has strong defense and economic cooperation with Israel. At the same time, India has a strategic partnership with the United States. But India also maintains long-standing diplomatic and economic ties with Iran. In other words, India sits in a rare position. It talks to everyone. And in international politics, that kind of balance can be extremely valuable. Macgregor's warning went beyond diplomacy. He argued that the current tensions could quickly grow into something much bigger than a single regional conflict. If the situation escalates further, the consequences may not be limited to military outcomes. They could spread directly into the global economy. Oil prices are already showing signs of pressure. If the conflict disrupts major energy routes in the region, prices could surge dramatically. Macgregor even raised the possibility that oil could climb toward $200 or even $300 per barrel. For the global economy, that would be a shock. Energy costs would spike. Stock markets could react sharply. And trillions of dollars in financial value could disappear across global markets. In short, what starts as a regional conflict could rapidly become a worldwide economic crisis. That's part of the reason he argues negotiations are urgently needed. So why specifically India? Macgregor's argument is based on diplomatic positioning. Some countries already play mediator roles in the Middle East. Countries like Qatar or Oman have historically hosted negotiations. But according to his view, they may not have enough influence to bring all sides to the table during a crisis of this scale. Then there are global powers like China or Russia, but involving them could immediately raise concerns about geopolitical bias. Each side may question whether the mediator is truly neutral. India, however, occupies a different space. India has spent years building relationships across competing blocs. It maintained cooperation with Western powers. It has strong ties with Israel. And at the same time, it has maintained communication and engagement with Iran. Because of this balanced diplomacy, Macgregor believes India might be one of the few actors that both sides could realistically trust to facilitate dialogue, not as an ally of one side, but as a mediator capable of opening a conversation. So what happens next? There are several possibilities. One scenario is continued escalation. If tensions continue rising without meaningful negotiations, the region could move closer to a broader military confrontation. And if that happens, the economic consequences could spread far beyond the Middle East. Another scenario is diplomatic intervention. If negotiations begin early enough, there may still be a chance to prevent the conflict from expanding further. In that context, the role of mediators becomes extremely important. And that's exactly where Macgregor believes India could potentially step in. Whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen. But the suggestion highlights something important. In modern geopolitics, influence isn't only about military power. Sometimes it's about who can still talk to everyone. So the message from the retired colonel was simple. If the goal is to stop the escalation and prevent a wider war, negotiations need to begin sooner rather than later. And if negotiations are going to happen, the mediator matters. According to his view, India may be one of the few countries positioned to speak with every side involved. The question now is whether the major powers involved would actually accept that kind of mediation. Because if the tensions continue to grow, the consequences may not stay limited to the Middle East. They could ripple across the entire global economy. And by that point, the price of diplomacy may start looking a lot cheaper than the cost of war.